Hi folks, Canadian Prepper here. So before we talk about the news of the day, which is going to have global implications within the next 6 days, we need to send our condolences to anybody who was affected by the shooting today. You know, this is all the more reason to be self-directed. Whenever you find yourself in a crowded event nowadays, it's safe to presume if you hear pop, pop, pop in the distance, it is gunshots. And you need to act like it is. Whether it's fireworks or firecrackers, or you're in a parade, or if it's something coming through the speakers, it's safe to assume nowadays that it's likely gunshots, because unfortunately events like this will be eclipsed by many more in the coming weeks, unfortunately, because this is just the nature of the world we're living in right now. Everything is crashing, and including the human psyche. The human psyche is folding under the pressure of this brave new world. It's important that you do not succumb to the normalcy bias, which is the bane of all of the unprepared. And it is the idea that something like this happens and you start looking for rationalizations as to why it's happening, and you're optimistic and you're rationalizing. It's safe to presume nowadays that you should be pessimistic, okay, when you're trying to size up what is going on, and you need to get out before the stampede hits, because those stampedes that get caused by events like this can be as catastrophic as the events itself, because a lot of people can get injured when you have hundreds of people running down the street where there's cars and all that crazy stuff, all right? So I do send my condolences out to people. This is all the more reason to be prepared. And one of those things is just having your head on a swivel, because things are getting crazier and crazier as the days go by. Now, I know I was reluctant to want to talk about this in today's video because it seems inappropriate, but it's also quite appropriate. And I'm not going to post like an affiliate link or anything, but I just want to let you know that Premier Body Armor is having a sale on that's exclusive for today. And it's a 1776 sale to commemorate July 4th, meaning that you get 17.76% off any type of body armor. So, like I say, I'm not posting a link because I don't want to. It just doesn't feel right to profit off of something like that. But, you know, this normalcy bias, guys, is a microcosm. And the reason why I'm talking about that is I've been watching videos of people like deer in headlights. You know, it's this fight, flight, or freeze. Most people will freeze and wonder, you know, well, what does that sound? Well, you know, you're living in the United States of America nowadays, or anywhere really in the Western world. That's probably what it is. It's probably gunshots, and you need to get out of Dodge. And it's a microcosm of what's happening on the global stage, where in Europe, so many people are still in like a deer in headlights right now, just like those people were in Ukraine one day prior to the war actually breaking out, when the government said, oh, don't worry about it, it's going to be fine within 24 hours. They're putting people in jail who wouldn't get in BDUs and go and fight the Russians. You know, that's the same thing. The same thing is happening, but on a global scale. And we're going to be releasing some videos in the next few weeks that are hopefully going to break that spell surrounding the events that are coming, because this whole Russia war situation, these shootings, all of this stuff, you know, I hate to sound like one of these biblical prophetic people, because I get a lot of people on the channel who are very religious, and, you know, they're always quick to throw out some scripture. But, you know, this is the collapse of Western civilization. Like, I mean, the psyche and everything, the psyche is buckling under the weight of this technical evolution, which has outpaced our ability to adapt to it. Like social media, the way we parent our kids, that's part of the problem, is that we are not parenting our children properly. I mean, that should go without saying. That, I mean, a lot of these kids just need a good kick in the ass, to be brutally honest. And you will see a direct increase in a direct correlation, I should say, which is not necessarily predictive, but it's a correlation between the reduction in corporal punishment and the increase in these kind of crazy incidents, because a lot of these kids need the ass whooping which comes from a place of love, not a place of abuse or sadism, but an ass whooping that is trying to instill in them and teach them about how the world works. Because a lot of these kids, it's a cry for attention. I was watching a video the other day with this kid throwing a tantrum in the store. It's an older video from like 7 years ago, completely destroying this small business, throwing things off the shelves, smashing things, just completely thousands of dollars in damage. Everybody is standing around wondering what the hell to do when this little 10-year-old kid is trashing this store, okay? Even the guy filming it, who thought it was funny, who was kind of egging the kid on, was part of the problem. Because that's the whole thing nowadays, that like a person filming it is part of the whole problem. And that was a microcosm of our society as a whole. We're letting these kids who are having these tantrums govern how we do things. They're holding us all hostage, and they just need a good old-fashioned ass whooping. And thankfully, there was somebody from the old school who grabbed that kid by the scruff of his neck and put him in his place and said, no, you cannot do that. And he probably saved that kid from, hopefully, from a life of crime that would ensue thereafter. And this is the problem. Everybody wants to give these positive affirmations and tell the positive affirmations to the dictators of the world or to the people who are invading other countries. Let's see how well those positive affirmations work in the real bloody world of war. And this war should remind people that we have not changed. But sure enough, people will forget. People always forget. We always think this time is different, but no, it is not. And that's why I hope that this recessionary, depressionary, possible end of the world as we know it cycle that we're entering into is going to show people what hard times are about once again. It could be a silver lining. This could be the blessing in disguise that we need to give us a collective kick in the ass so we can be reminded of what is important with our decadent, frivolous, soft little behinds that perhaps just need a spanking, some tough love, if you will. Now, let's get to the main subject matter of this video. Some things are happening in the next 7 days that are of critical importance that are going to have global implications, okay? So Russia has begun 24-hour monitoring to detect nuclear explosions. Now, this is a new facility that they've inaugurated, which is going to increase the accuracy in which they can detect geophysical disturbances caused by human intervention as well as nuclear weapons. Now, one of the issues and one of the concerns for nuclear escalation has always been that the Russian detection systems are not as accurate as the American ones. Therefore, the Russians are on a bit more of a hair trigger and liable to perhaps misinterpret or make a mistake or even miss a launching of ICBMs or an actual nuclear detonation by other countries. This is just adding to the body of evidence that the nuclear tension is ratcheting up between nations. We know that Russia has had its nuclear forces on heightened alert since February. That apparently has not been reciprocated, at least by the American wing of NATO. And it appears as though we're still at DEFCON 5, even though all things would indicate that we should be at DEFCON 3 or 2, you know, through some periods of this war, possibly, 2. And this is, nuclear experts think that this is a worse situation than the Cuban Missile Crisis, that we are closer to nuclear Armageddon than the Cuban Missile Crisis. Go and watch the last 4 videos we did with Dr. Peter Pry. Completely blew our minds with counterintuitive information, okay, about how nuclear war would unfold. And it's a series that everybody must see in order to educate yourself, because there's a lot that we are not being told about how this situation could potentially play out. Now, why is this so important right now? That's not the big news of today. Far from it. It's important right now because, as we suggested in a video that we recently released, that apparently the Russians may be running out of these specialized cruise missiles. Okay, and there's more evidence today to suggest that Russia is using more non-precision missiles from its old Soviet stockpiles for more than half of its attacks in Ukraine. And this is why we're starting to see these building misses, like civilian buildings hit, etc. Now, we know that in these types of wars, often the defending forces will put various defense artillery or missile defense or equipment in and around civilian places to act as human shields. I'm not saying this is what's happening, but this has happened historically in war. That has been the excuse that the Russians are giving for targeting these specific places. We try to look at this as objectively as possible, okay? This is their explanation. They deny that they hit that shopping mall. I can't remember what town it was in. They deny that they hit that. They claim that it was a false flag by the Ukrainians. Ukrainians deny this. And the word on the street is that they are running low on certain missiles, which do require a fairly sophisticated manufacturing process, which is limited. It's not that they can just say, okay, let's double and triple the amount of production. Okay, it doesn't work that way. You need facilities, you need people to work, which is why a bill was recently passed through the Duma that allowed them to have these war powers that will expedite the manufacturing process and basically get people to work longer hours in order to manufacture these weapons. So there may well still be a shortage of weapons. Why this is important is because, like we said in the last video, Russia has an ample supply of tactical nuclear missiles, nuclear warheads at their disposal that they may well use if, times get really tough. Now, of course, they just successfully have taken over Lugansk, the whole of Lugansk region. This is something which has been widely accepted on mainstream media now. It's not a secret. It's not up for debate. However, there's a long way to go. Okay, they still have the Donetsk region. There's still, the entirety of Ukraine, is likely going to eventually be under the gun. You have the Snake Island thing. Apparently, the Ukrainians are trying to reclaim Snake, or they've reclaimed it, technically, or they claim to have reclaimed it, and they're in the process of putting weapon systems on there again, or at least they're going to attempt to. And all of this shows that, as much as it does appear that the Russians are winning, and that's the consensus on alternative media, that's not to say that this is far from over. And the scary part is if they do start running out of supplies and NATO is able to reinforce the Ukrainians to a sufficient extent, and NATO has their own limitations with respect to resupply, we all know that, then we could potentially be looking at Russia tapping into this tactical nuclear arsenal, especially if this situation gets out of control. Now, this Kaliningrad situation it's looking like there's three potential options for the Russians. Four options, actually. Kaliningrad is an exclave of Russia. Okay, let's see if we can zoom out here. Okay, so here's Russia. Okay, here's Lithuania. Here's Kaliningrad. We'll just zoom in. This is Belarus, this country here. Okay, and there's this little gap called the Suwalki corridor, which is, from Belarus to Kaliningrad. Now, the only way they can get stuff into Kaliningrad is either through the Baltic Sea or through a railroad that goes through here. And typically, in normal times, they would be able to ship supplies through there. But now Lithuania has imposed a blockade. Many people think that they've imposed, or many experts, I should say, ones who are not commonly listened to in the legacy media, have proposed that the reason why they're doing this is because they are deadly scared about being abandoned by the Western countries within NATO. Okay, these Baltic states are very concerned about what happens once Belarus unifies with Russia and once Russia incorporates these breakaway republics in the conquered parts of Ukraine. Because remember, the map is going to change now. This map of Russia that we've come to know is going to be different when they unify with Belarus, which they're pretty much, it's going to be some new, it's not going to be Soviet, they won't call it that, but it'll be something very similar. And these countries are very, very concerned about that. which is why they're putting on, the NATO is claiming that they're going to have 300,000 guys on a state of readiness. And in order to have 300,000 men ready at the drop of a hat, you need them to be ready. So you need 300,000 guys across these regions. A lot of people say that that is not going to be achievable right now, at least not in the immediate future. As such, Lithuania is concerned about its existence because Russians could create a naval blockade. That's one of the possible outcomes here. They could create a naval blockade which would block off these Baltic states, Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, from receiving supplies, in particular Lithuania, okay? They can block them off. Obviously, there would still be this Suwalki corridor. So the other option, if diplomacy fails, if they don't remove the blockade, then the other option, the Russians would actually just, do a military intervention and secure, just like how they kind of done with Transnistria, take over that part of the country. Now, of course, that would violate Article 5 of NATO, which would bring, in theory, which would bring the question of NATO involvement into the war, because we're already seeing the goalposts being moved. At first, Article 5 was like an immediate, absolute, the full force of NATO is coming to your rescue. Now, when people talk about it, even in the mainstream media, they're kind of saying, well, this is open to interpretation. It's a little bit ambiguous in terms of how it's interpreted, okay? So there's no guarantees that we're going to come to Lithuania's rescue. And Peter Pry made an excellent point. In one of those videos that we did, he said that, none of these countries wants to put itself in the crosshairs by launching some sort of attack against Russia. Because think about it. If Russia invades Lithuania, who's going to come to Lithuania's aid? Well, one of these countries has to. So then, they're going to be in the crosshairs. It's not going to be, France and the UK who are, miles away. Yes, maybe some of that military is going to be fighting with the Russians, but they're doing it from the comfort of their living rooms, right? Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, they're all on the front lines of this. Finland as well. So, it's those are the four possibilities for how this could potentially play out. And yeah, I think I touched on all four of those. The convoy can pass through Lithuanian territory, but then we were talking about the occupation of the Suwalki corridor. We were talking about an aggressive operation where the operational depth is not that great, so 60 kilometers. And they're saying that they can take that in 3 days. Now, I know what the jokes are going to be about, taking Ukraine in 3 days. That was a narrative that was pushed by Western MSM. The Russians never said they were going to take Ukraine in 3 days. But the Russians are saying that they could take this in 3 days, which they probably could, realistically speaking. Whether or not they're going to proceed to, take the whole country or not is unknown. Undoubtedly, if they do that, there's going to be a lot of problems with NATO. Now, the naval blockade issue is the other one. Now, the other option is that the Russians just eat it and they continue to ship in goods via, the Baltic from St. Petersburg or whatever, this northern part of Russia, and they just continue to ship goods around. Of course, that's going to increase the price of goods in Kaliningrad, put more stress on the population there, which the Russians probably aren't going to go for. But this is the potential next point of escalation. The reason why I'm so concerned, I used the term Russian apologist last time. That probably wasn't the best term. There's people who are, Russian sympathizers in this conflict. And I'm not one of these, Ukrainian fanatics and, everything Ukraine does is good. But I try to look at things objectively. And it seems like the Russian sympathizers always minimize anything the Ukrainians do and maximize anything that the Russians do. And the Ukrainians do the complete opposite, right? So, like in the last week or so, I got sent an email by somebody, and I was thinking the exact same thing when they sent me this email, is that you're seeing all this increased amount of news now in the last 7 days about successful strikes, like how they'll show like these little anecdotal reports of Ukrainians taking out, Russian groups of tanks or corridors of tanks or whatever, and we're seeing more of that in the last 7 to 14 days. And so my thinking is that indicates one of two things. Either the Russians are losing or the Ukrainians are losing. And that's why they're posting a lot of that I don't know what you would call it, just we got to give a name for it. It needs a name. But it's just, and obviously some people would call it propaganda, but its own unique brand where you're trying to pretend like you're doing better than you are, which is an effective strategy to win the propaganda campaign and win the hearts and minds of the people, because they're going to need them right now, because they are even posting, apparently they're posting conscription notices in churches now. It's gotten so bad that they're going to be conscripting women starting October 1st if they're between a certain age. And this is in the city of Lviv. They were posting conscription notices on churches just this past Sunday, which has a lot of, I guess they would be pastors or whoever, clergy, up in arms about that, literally. Probably not the best metaphor to use, but because they're concerned about Belarus entering the war and possibly attacking Ukraine from the north. So the situation is getting all the more intense. In terms of death estimates, some of these articles are just funny, man. Like Russian military deaths past 36,000, Ukraine says, as Putin gains exact heavy toll. The fact that our media is using these numbers, and I mean, they might be right, but the fact that they're relying on, the Ukrainian armed forces numbers of what, the deaths of Russians is just, it's asinine. I mean, it's an insult to all of our intelligence. And it's scary, because if this is how a war is going to be waged with this level of just deception, it's scary if we ever enter this war, because we can expect a replay of this, okay? A replay of how did it start? Well, they said they were never going to invade. Remember when Zelensky said, they're never going to invade, don't worry about it. Within 24 hours, he's got a gun in everybody's hand, and if you don't have one in your hand, you are, at risk of going to jail. You're called a traitor, whatever. You're a dodger, and, people are trying to escape from the country because they don't want to be conscripted, that sort of thing. And all throughout this, we know that right up into the last minute, they will say they're winning, they're going to take the territory back. They may, I'm not saying they won't, because we're not, minimizers here. We're not Russian sympathizer minimizers. We're objective in our analysis. We try to view things from all ways. But if this is how the information war is going to be waged, we are totally screwed, because this information that we're getting, there's a reason why so many people are seeking out alternative viewpoints, because on its face, it's just bullshit. It's like, why would you, even if they were on your side, you wouldn't trust the information that they're providing. Like this story here, Ukraine big victory at Snake Island could be a turning point. Now, it may be a turning point. If you ask me, it looks pretty bad for the Russians retreating from Snake Island, even though a lot of military strategists will say that this didn't really have much utility for the Russians and that it was just a liability. But it doesn't look good. But, that's from the same news source, Newsweek, that said that are referencing Ukrainian armed forces for Russian military casualties. Just doesn't make any sense. Bulgaria has expelled 70 Russian diplomats, which is not good. Another major escalation. I don't know if there's any diplomats left anywhere. Everybody's getting expelled from somewhere. Did I talk about the old Soviet missiles that are not that accurate? I think I did talk about that being used in this war, because the Russians are supposedly running out of ammunition. I think I talked about it. If I didn't, that's part of the reason why we're looking at a potential escalation to the tactical nuclear level. And if you think that the United States of America is going to get involved just because the Russians drop a tactical nuke on some Ukrainian military base, then you're in for a rude awakening. You're in for a big awakening, because if they haven't intervened yet, they ain't going to intervene in that way. Now, the only saving grace for Ukraine from a perspective of the U.S. getting involved in the war is politically saving face. It looks like the Democrats are going to get destroyed. However, the presidential election is still 2 years away. But we have the midterm elections coming up. And, you know, depending on how bad things get, you know, somebody might tell somebody else that, hey, we need to do something here. We need to get the United States involved in this war more directly, because as we all know, no president has ever not been elected during a time of war. However, this is not the presidential race yet. Okay, a lot of people are treating these midterms, and I know they're definitely of high importance, but it's looking like the Democrats are going to be destroyed. And for that reason, I wouldn't be surprised if something big happens, because something has to happen. I mean, either the Fed is going to start printing money again, or, you know, they're going to have to do something to get back in people's good books. Yeah, we talked about the Belarusian and Russian unification. A Russian MP has recommended that they move hypersonic weapons within striking distance of the U.S. Russian Duma member Andrei Gurylyov was speaking on Russian state TV and discussing the need for a resolution to the ongoing conflict between Russia and Ukraine. He said moving hypersonic weapons within striking distance of U.S. territory would force President Biden to come to the negotiating table with Russia and stop supplying Ukraine with weapons for the conflict. I don't know, because it appears as though, you know, the whole point of strategic nuclear deterrence, according to Peter Pry, is to make other countries aware, okay, of what you're doing. So how much time do we got left on the clock? Okay, I don't think I have as much time as I need to explain this. Go and watch those last 4 videos about strategic nuclear deterrence, about tactical nukes, about nuclear winter, about super EMP weapons. Very eye-opening stuff. That's pretty much all I got for you guys today. You know, I mean, Europe is prepping itself for an energy crisis. Record high temperatures spark an avalanche in Italy as one of the largest alpine glacier collapses. That's part of the reason why you're seeing all the rivers drying up around the world, is because the glaciers are melting, and that's going to have pretty big impact on the ability to produce electricity with dams, and of course, providing us with water. So shizzy sit in the fizzy, folks, both psychologically and in the flesh. Let me know what your thoughts are on the things I've discussed today, and thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. If you enjoyed the video, Canadian Prepper out.